Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Social Hotelier podcast with me, Sam-Erik. Are you wasting thousands on digital ads without even realizing it? Most businesses are without a clear strategy. In this episode, we uncover how to stop burning your budget and start making your ads work for you. Join us for an enlightening conversation with John Horn, CEO of Stub Group, a leading digital advertising agency. In this episode, we will explore the cutting-edge strategies shaping Google Ads, Meta, and beyond, and uncover how businesses, big or small, can thrive in an AI-driven landscape. Whether you are curious about avoiding common pitfalls, tracking campaign success, or exploring the future of platforms like TikTok and Pinterest, this episode promises actionable insights and expert advice. So don't miss the chance to stay ahead of the curve. So welcome, John, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, maybe we get started. Is that first, I think for our audience to get some background, can you share about your professional experience?
Absolutely. So I've been really focused on the digital advertising space for over the last decade, specifically through my company, Stub Group, like you mentioned, the CEO of, and get to work with all sorts of different types of businesses across a pretty wide spectrum of business models and industries, and helping them navigate that landscape of digital advertising platforms like the ones you mentioned, and ultimately figuring out how do we find new customers, connect with them, bring them on board in a cost-effective way to help businesses scale and make more money online.
Very good. Well, to be successful, you must have, on a personal level, some superpowers. Or what is your superpower?
I don't know if I'll be as bold to say I have a superpower, but I would say I do, genuinely care about the clients we work with, their success, the quality of work that we put into things. And I think that's incredibly important, especially in the agency world that I'm a part of, is just, not looking at each client as, hey, just another paycheck or, a squeaky wheel you got to put grease on, that type of thing, but truly caring and saying, hey, I want to partner with them and figure out how we're going to make them successful. And I think that's a very important thing and something I look for in all the team members that we bring on board to help our clients.
Yeah. So you really believe in a long-term relationship and developing trust and working long-term with your clients to set them up for success.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's cool. What are some common pitfalls or mistakes businesses make when managing Google Ads campaigns, and can you maybe give some examples on how can they avoid them?
There are many. I would say one of the most common ones I see is especially when advertisers are getting into Google Ads or deciding to test it. And that is just not thinking through what is success going to look like and really having a strategy in place when they go into it. A lot of businesses take more of the approach of, hey, let's throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
And, to a certain extent, sometimes you need to do that. But when you go into any platform, whether it be Google Ads or anything else, you need to optimize your chances for success, give yourself the best leg up, so to speak. And so, you want to think through things like, okay, well, what does success look like? What am I trying to drive from these campaigns? What action do I want people to take? Is it calling me through my website? Is it filling out a form on my own website? Is it, showing up physically at my location? Things like that. And then you got to think through, okay, how am I going to track that and track as well as I can which of those actions are coming from the campaigns I'm running so I can understand, is this working? Is it not working? And which parts of it are working so I can scale that, double down on that, and then cut the things that just aren't working and driving the results I want to drive.
Yeah, I mean, you must have these conversations with your initially with the client of about the goals and so on. And when you talk about pitfalls, can you just share something what is the worst case scenario if they have such a high expectations that they will start to make that it's immediately successful, and then maybe it's a lack of patience because of not having that experience. So what are the things that you're telling them to be cautious about?
Yeah, so a couple of specific things I would say. First of all, you mentioned patience, and I think that's really important because a lot of businesses, they look at advertising as some kind of a magic bullet that's going to fix all of their problems. And that's not how advertising works. Advertising is really fuel on the fire of what you're doing. And so if you have, you know, a bad business model or an offer that's not compelling to people or so forth, advertising is not going to fix that. It's just going to get you more, more bad. And so it's really important to have your other things working well, and then look at advertising as, okay, now I'm going to get more people into my funnel, more people exposed to who I am, and try and scale that way. So I think that's looking at advertising as that magic bullet is a big mistake.
Yeah.
I would also say another big mistake is coming into things and trusting. Well, let's talk about Google specifically. This is true of Meta as well, but Google in particular, trusting all of the best practices of the platform. So that you can go and create your own DIY campaigns with Google Ads, for example, and Google will walk you through like, hey, here's do this, have this setting turned on, etc. But at the end of the day, a lot of the kind of the default settings and things that Google's going to push you towards are not necessarily in your best interest as an advertiser. And so a lot of people will just do everything Google says, run campaigns. The campaigns will bomb. They won't get good results. And they'll say, oh, Google Ads doesn't work for my business. But the reality is they haven't, run a good campaign to know whether or not it could work for their business. And so I see that happen very often as well.
Yeah. So do you go through like a checklist with them about those settings and so on, so that you help them to avoid those kind of pitfalls that somebody like if I get into advertising or getting my advertising campaign, that I will not fall into those kind of beginner's mistakes, if you will.
Yeah, we basically do all that work for them. So
Yeah.
we're responsible for the ad account, and we've got all those internal things where it's like, okay, watch out for this, watch out for that. And then a lot of it's nuanced to their business. So, sometimes what is a best practice and is a good setting for this business is not a good setting for that business. And that's where that human element needs to come in and kind of analyze and say, okay, for your business, for your specific goals, this is the right, set of settings to start with, and then go from there.
Yeah. And people talk about, I mean, I follow, of course, the social media campaigns, and also I'm looking quite a bit on Instagram, in fact. And I noticed how hotels and restaurants are more and more focusing or having campaigns on those rather than spending on the traditional advertising. But in your opinion, maybe some tips you have, how can hotels and restaurants leverage the platforms like Instagram or maybe Meta ads to create meaningful customer engagement?
Yeah, Instagram, Meta, platforms like that can be fantastic places to get that customer engagement. And I would encourage very much focusing on that word engagement. So how can we get people actually engaging with, not just engaging with our content, but creating content for us? So there's this idea of UGC, or user generated content. And there's lots of different creative ways that brands can encourage people to take photos, share experiences about their experience with the brand. So here's a good example. I would say actually a missed opportunity, but something that could have been really good. So I was traveling recently with my wife in Rome, in Italy, and we're just walking down the street, came up to this sign. It had a picture of two people kissing, and it had something in Italian. So pull out Google Translate. I don't know Italian, but okay, what is this? Translate it to English, and basically it's something like kissing is mandatory in this zone, something like that. It's kind of a cute little thing. Yeah. I was like, oh, cool. And there's an Instagram handle on there. And what I thought it would be was, I thought it was gonna be a location, basically, hey, take a picture of you kissing and put it on here, and you'd have this kind of really cool hashtag of people at this location, sharing an intimate moment. It wasn't actually that. It was just taking us to a clothing brand, which was, less exciting, but that could have been a great experience. If you're having something like that at your hotel or your resort, where you're encouraging people with a hashtag to capture that moment, share it, and then all of their friends and acquaintances on the social platforms see that type of thing. And you're getting all sorts of free and fantastic brand exposure through things like that.
Yeah, that's a great tip. Absolutely. I think there are hotels, of course, and restaurants who are, particularly hotels who are, they are trying to set up a sort of a Instagrammable location of the hotel. Some of the hotels or resorts have natural setting, so they really don't need to do anything about it. But actually, then on the other side, you have some indoor space, or whether it's off the lobby or in a kind of quiet corner where they have. There's a famous artist who has created some kind of artwork, and this is a kind of a background for successful selfies, if you will. So there are many ways hotels can leverage this opportunity, and also creating some call to action to get a little bit of a conversation going there, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yep. Having a mural there, like you said, which is a great spot, and having a hashtag, having just kind of clearly delineated areas where, hey, yep, share this, as well as thinking through, what's something that you can do to surprise in a very good way the guest and create that moment of excitement where they're like, you'll never believe what just happened to me. They did this, and they just want to share that with their friends. And how do you share with friends these days? Social media. So looking to create those moments of wonder and those locations that inspire people to share what they're doing, share the experience they're having, which then by default also shares your brand in a very positive light with the world.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not putting a plug here for a friend of mine who's wrote a book, but he wrote a book called Audacious. So he's talking about a moment of awe, what you can, which is exactly what you're talking about. But and while I'm reading through the book, as I do at the moment, there is so many examples that you can be very bold and do things so differently that it creates a surprise moment, but with the awe that you actually feel compelled to share it with your community and your friends. So yeah, with the one thing which I'm struggling with is the search SEO tactics, and I really banging my head because I'm always looking for a way how can either for my particular YouTube channel or when I do any postings, how I can get drive more eyeballs on my content. But my question really is, with the decline of traditional SEO tactics, how can businesses adapt their strategies to remain visible in search rankings?
Yeah, SEO is very different than it used to be. We're a long way from those 10 blue links that used to be the focus of optimization. And now you've got, sure, you still have the blue links, but you've got ads, you have AI overviews, you have videos and so forth. And so one of the things that I think it's important for businesses, for websites to focus on is what are the areas where there's a bit less competition, where you can get kind of more bang for the buck in terms of the investment of time and energy that you put into things. You mentioned YouTube, and I think that's an area for a lot of websites where that's something they can capitalize on. Video results are a top thing that comes up when you search on Google. They're a big part of the SERP now, the search engine results page. And then obviously YouTube itself also is, as Google likes to say, that second largest search engine, a place where a lot of people actually go to start searches as well. And I would say for the majority of industries, there's going to be just less content that can come up on YouTube than websites and landing pages that could come up. And so really looking to create great videos that are optimized towards the types of questions people are asking. It could be things like, hey, you have a hotel in Rome. Awesome. Well, what are some things, sure, you could go after things like, hotels in Rome and try and capture that keyword, and maybe that makes sense. But also, what are questions people are asking that would indicate they might be interested? So again, I just traveled to Rome recently. We traveled with 2 small children, and we found a resource that had tons of information about what do you do in Rome when you have small children. Well, that's kind of a long tail thing, but you could create videos about that and stand out from the competition, stand out from just the general, hey, top 10 hotels in Rome, things like that, and create, interesting content, helpful content. And then, hey, oh, by the way, have plugs in there for, our hotel is family friendly. We're here. We'd love to see you. Things like that. So I think when we're looking at, like in the search engine results page, video is kind of an underserved area where I encourage a lot of brands to put attention. And then also on the video side of things, I would emphasize shorts. So shorts specifically on YouTube get a tremendous amount of views right now, especially compared to long form videos. And they are often an intro for people into long form videos. So people may start seeing your shorts, find, that, oh, that's cool, that's interesting, see a couple of those coming up in their feed. And then from there, they may subscribe to you or go, when they have time, watch a longer form video on your YouTube channel. And so I highly encourage, lots of shorts, again, high quality, like good stuff, stuff that people are going to be interested in, not just churning out content for the sake of content, but, cool videos that will then represent your brand well and get people watching more of your content.
Yeah, I mean, I noticed that shorts is very good. I mean, I divide, for instance, our episode when it comes out, it'll be in chapters, of course, so people will kind of choose which, what they want to focus on when they're looking at this episode with you, John, and the topics of our conversation. But then when I cut it to shorts, also I try to look for some particular point in the conversation that might appeal to the audience who are interested in this topic, and put that into shorts, which then drives them to hopefully look at the rest of the video in the long form. So that's my strategy. So am I on the right track with this?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we see the same thing, with our own YouTube channel here at Stub Group, is that our shorts content gets exponentially more views, generally speaking, than the long form. And then that a view of your long form is probably going to be worth more than a view on your short because people are investing more time, but you can get more exposure and get kind of more people into that funnel, so to speak, by really emphasizing that short content.
Yeah. That's a great tip. Another thing which I'm curious about, how do you approach balancing innovation with compliance in digital advertising, particularly when avoiding ad disapprovals or account suspensions, which is a very sensitive topic for a lot of people and worries.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up because we spend a ton of time thinking about policies, policy compliance here at Step Group, and we actually help tons and tons of advertisers who've, accidentally violated policies or don't believe they violated policies, but still got flagged by Google or Meta or so forth, and helping them with those situations. And at the end of the day, there's prevention and then there's reaction if you have an issue. So prevention is always the best approach. And so for prevention, you want to understand as much as you can about the policies of the platform you're using. There are, sometimes there's obvious things, obviously, that you shouldn't do, but there's all sorts of different nuances where you could be like, hey, I didn't know I was supposed to have these policy pages on my website, or I didn't know I can't have a redirect in my URL, or fill in the blank. And so I strongly recommend to people, whatever platform they're going to work with, read through the policies as much as you can. And of course, I'm biased here, but ideally work with somebody who has the time and experience of looking through those policies, like an agency who does this for a living, and tap into their expertise as well to make sure you're not falling afoul of policies. And then if you do have policy issues, if you have disapproved ads or suspended accounts, things like that, then I always recommend very kind of systematic looking at what's going on and trying to identify how to fix the problem and prove to Google or to Meta that you fixed the problem. Because what a lot of businesses will do, they'll get a flag or a suspended account, for example. And the first thing they'll do is they'll go to Google, be like, hey, we didn't do anything wrong. Tell us what we did wrong. We'll fix it. And then, we should be good to go. And that's just not how Google operates. They don't tell you what you did wrong outside of, pointing you to kind of a vague policy. And what you do is you submit that appeal and Google just says rejected. And now you've used up your first appeal and you're in a worse spot than you were previously. And now you're like, oh, now I've wasted a week of time, and so forth and so on. And so you really want to take it very seriously and say, okay, what could possibly have gone wrong? Look through your account, look through your website, try to make everything perfect is how I put it. And then be very, very specific in any appeals you submit to the platform, explaining what you've done to fix any potential problems, approaching in a very respectful manner, not yelling at them, because that's not going to improve your chances of success, and approaching things in that manner. And it doesn't always work. Sometimes there's all sorts of things that go into suspensions policy stuff, but that approach definitely increases your chances of having a successful outcome.
Yeah. Can you give some examples without mentioning names of brands or companies, but give some incidents that you have experienced or seen, which are some of those issues that they should be aware about?
Yeah, I could talk all day about this. Couple of examples. So We had a business. They'd been on Shark Tank, actually, a very very reputable, significant sized business, and their ad account got suspended. No idea why. Google wasn't helping them. We dug into things with them, and eventually we figured out what was going on, which was they, a couple years previously, had changed their domain from one thing to another thing. And they weren't doing anything wrong in their account. They weren't advertising the old domain that no longer worked, but they had paused ads literally from years ago in their ad account. And they didn't realize that Google still crawls paused ads, even though you're not running them, even though it may be years since you've run them. And they caught like, hey, there's a redirect. This domain redirects that domain, which is against Google's policies. And so they suspended the account. And it seems simple, but again, they had no way of knowing this. Google wouldn't tell them what the problem was. It didn't say this is why. And so, had to dig in and figure that out. So that's an example. Another example would be, we've seen lots of things in the franchise space. So you might have a franchise that is, a fully legitimate franchisee of a franchisor, and they have their website. And on their website, they have the franchise logo. The domain is, similar to the franchisor's, like, name of company in Boston, Massachusetts.com or whatever. But what Google does is they see this and they're like, oh, you're suspended for unacceptable business practices because we think that you're mimicking this other website and pretending to be them. And now you have to go and prove, no, like, we're a franchisee, we have permission to do this. We're not misleading anybody. But because of the way that Google systems work, things like that get flagged all the time. So those two examples, we could probably spend all day talking through it, but yeah, I've kind of seen everything under the sun to some extent in terms of Google's suspension trigger figure, so to speak.
Yeah, well, those are great examples. So it's very good. What do you think newer platforms like TikTok or Pinterest will play in the future of digital marketings for diverse industries, including hospitality?
TikTok is definitely the most significant, relatively new channel that has already such a massive impact on kind of all forms of life. It's also ironically the one where there's the most we don't know what's going to happen from a policy perspective, at least in the U.S. So we'll see where things go there. But yeah, I mean, it's tremendously important. People spend so much time on TikTok; they consume so much content, and I think that's a very important channel, especially for people in the hospitality space to be, because hospitality, it's so experience focused, it's so visual. It's seeing what does it look like. It's seeing this amazing view. It's seeing this awesome hotel room, things like that. And so I think TikTok's a very important place to be, particularly for people in the hospitality space. I think Pinterest, as another example, I would say much less important than TikTok. I think there's definitely times where it's relevant. I would say it's got a much smaller user base and a bit of a different type of user base as well. So if I was going to kind of pick, let's say, maybe a graduated list of channels that I want to spend my time on as a hospitality brand in terms of organic content that I'm putting out there, TikTok and I'd say YouTube are probably going to be the top two, honestly, that I go for. Maybe Instagram a very close second, then Facebook. Then after that, maybe things like X, Pinterest, kind of further down, Snapchat, things like that. But yeah, TikTok, YouTube, and then really Instagram are probably the top three that I would say should be a focus.
But then would that be also because of the depending on your strategy on the audience you're trying to attract? So TikTok is for some particular age groups or generations compared to YouTube, or is there a relevance there?
I would say, in the earlier days of TikTok, it definitely skewed much towards younger people. I would say at this point, there are tremendous numbers of every age of person on there. So I don't think it's nearly the young person's platform exclusively that it was previously. I do think that there is a higher percentage of young people on TikTok than other platforms. So while whatever age range you're going after, you're going to find them on TikTok. Definitely if you're going for a younger age range and you're only picking, let's say one channel to really focus on, then TikTok is often going to be, I would say, one to focus on. Again, if you're willing to deal with the instability of what might happen with that platform and what that's going to look like in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. Would there be like the TikTok campaigns would be a little bit more outrageous and into your face compared to maybe a YouTube, or is there any difference in your opinion, what you have seen?
I would say I don't see massive differences between the platforms, and part of that too is because a lot of people, take the same content and put it across multiple platforms. So
Okay.
you'll have the same short on TikTok as on Instagram, as on YouTube, that type of thing, in terms of the short side of things.
Yeah.
So I would say, yeah, it's a little bit agnostic as far as the content goes, and it's just more of, hey, some people are spending their time on TikTok versus watching Instagram Reels versus YouTube Shorts, etc.
Okay. Uh, Given the rapid evolution of algorithms on platforms like LinkedIn, what strategies can content creators adopt to maintain engagement with their audience? Because I have a first-hand experience with LinkedIn as I went live, and in the beginning, a few years ago, I got a lot of distribution and a lot of eyeballs to see the content, and suddenly they dropped like. And I thought, well, what's wrong with my content? What did I do wrong? So have you noticed the change yourself with and maybe with your clients?
Yes, there's absolutely that impact of, hey, something's working well, and then like you said, okay, things drop off the cliff, and we haven't done
Yeah,
anything different. Why? And so yeah, the algorithms, they give and take away, so to
yeah,
speak. My recommendation to content creators is always going to be, relatively foundational, of put most of your focus on the quality of the content you're creating, less on the algorithm. Because at the end of the day, the algorithm's goal is to share content with people that they find interesting and relevant and spend time with. And so I see a lot of businesses, they spend all their time just chasing the algorithm. And sometimes they get short term wins from that, because it is possible at times to game the algorithm and to figure out, oh, you know what, it likes this kind of very unique content at this time of day or whatever. But generally speaking, those types of things don't last for the long term, because the algorithm, everybody's looking for that gaming. They're saying, okay, it's being gamed in this way. Let's, put a fix in, that type of thing. It evolves. And so, it's a frustrating answer to somebody who um, was seeing the benefits maybe of the algorithm liking them, and then seeing things drop off the cliff. But
yeah,
from my perspective, the best long term focus is really focus on that content, making
yeah,
it as good as possible, making it relevant to people, and also diversifying across platforms, because there will always be that time where this platform changes. It could be temporary, it could be permanent. But if you're exclusively getting all of your traffic, all of your views, business from that one platform, then you are incredibly dependent upon that, and your business can literally go under if things change. Whereas if you are just creating great content, diversifying across multiple channels and ways people can find you, you're going to build more stability into your business model.
yeah. I mean, that's a great tip. That was just for thinking of if TikTok were to disappear tomorrow, what platforms or strategy would you recommend business to pivot to, and why?
So I think Google and Meta are both very much rooting for TikTok to go down, because I think they will see a tremendous increase in, time people spent on YouTube and on Instagram and Facebook if people leave TikTok. I personally like, TikTok is a very addictive app, but I think that I don't think people are necessarily as I don't think it's as sticky as some people think. I think people just, they love that short form content, but they can get that in multiple places. Right now, TikTok is just where they are, where they find it. But if TikTok goes away, they'll find it on YouTube, they'll find it on Instagram, and so forth. And so I think those channels are what will significantly win if TikTok goes away.
Yeah. Very good. I mean, you have a great deal of experience. I can hear in your answers and so on. What are some emerging trends in digital advertising that you believe that will have the most significant impact? Not talking about the years and years, but just looking ahead, how you see the trends and so on.
The buzzword definitely is AI these days, and it's a buzzword for a reason. But most specifically, looking at things like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Gemini, seeing some changes in just the way people conduct searches, and more people starting their search and searching differently by going to one of those platforms, as opposed to just going to Google and starting their search there. And we're seeing, we're not at a place where Google's going away anytime in the near future, in my opinion, but we are at a place where Google has more of a challenge to their dominance of the search market than any time in a very long time. And I think that just the way that people search is what's going to change. So again, it's not that, oh, they're going to a different search engine. It's that we're going more towards this kind of natural language conversation. Hey, go find me, here's the criteria. Go find me the 5 best hotels in this location that are family friendly, that are cheaper than X amount per night, things like that. Things that you just can't search Google in that way. You might, try and find a website that's got the kind of information and then go to there. Whereas now you might go to Perplexity or go to ChatGPT and literally define the criteria of that search and kind of engage back and forth with it. So I think that is going to be probably the single biggest change in digital advertising, digital marketing, the search world, just how people find information in the next, right now and in the next couple of years is going to be things like ChatGPT and Perplexity and so forth.
Yeah, and yeah, I think you have to explore continuously, not just be comfortable with what you're doing at the moment, but try and don't worry about failing there, but then you try something else. I mean, that's how I think I see how the world works. That you just have to try a number of things, and it might be the craziest idea. People say that you don't try that, but you try it, and who knows? It might work. In fact.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you mentioned earlier that you're traveling on holidays with your family and so on, and obviously we are I'm a hospitality channel, so and as many of our listeners know, we love technology here at the Social Hotelier. The only way to keep up with the new demands of travelers is to keep up with the latest trends and so on. From whether it's it's not so new anymore, but self check-in, digital concierges, and keyless entries and so on. So I'm just curious to get your view on automation in hotels, because we see that this has escalated. Particularly, you could see that from the time of the pandemic. Do you think this is a way of the future, or with less human contact? So is automation in hotels good or not, or how you see it from the customer point of view?
I personally like automation and the efficiencies that come with it. Ironically, so I mentioned I was traveling to Rome recently. They just put a law in place recently where Airbnb hosts can't offer self check-in, where they have to meet you physically and do things. So legislatively, there are definitely some areas where there's pushback on automation and self check-in and whatnot. But personally, I like it. I think it's one of those things where you're always going to have, at least for a while, you're going to have different buckets or segments of population. You're going to have people like me, and I think probably it's going to skew more towards young people who just grew up in a more technologically, first world, where we're more used to, self check-in, self ordering, things like that, and we like the efficiency that comes with that. Whereas there's also going to be people who just like that human touch and aspect. And that's something that they may be more used to as well. So I think probably generationally, as current youth grow up and become more the people who are spending the money on the hotels, spending the money on the stays, there's going to be more and more push and demand for automation, self check-in, things like that. I think we're still at a place, right now where there are plenty of people who like that human touch, where it's maybe not 100% required. And I'm talking a little bit, certainly I'm talking outside of the scope of my expertise, because I'm not in the operations side of the hotel industry. So extrapolating some opinions here. But I think as people, as the current youth get older and become more of the money spenders, it makes sense to really lean into that automation side of things.
Yeah, I mean, from my experience, I also enjoy the fact that I can. I'm arriving to let's say I would fly into Rome. It's a late night. I love the idea that I can just I have everything in my hand that I can get up to the room right away. And then when I actually need some help, maybe the next day and so on, I want to ask a question, then I can of course connect with a person in concierge or one of the service managers and so on. But I really also enjoy the fact that I can have a quick access to the room. I'm tired. I'm not interested in having a long chat with anyone. I just want to get some rest. But the key factor is that when you have when you get to the room and something is not right there, and how to get it fixed quickly. And I found, of course, that if you had someone in certain hotels, you have people to escort to your room, then you can. Normally in these hotels, then they will explain to you the features, and also they will also notice themselves that, oh, okay, we are missing this, we are missing that, so they'll fix it right away. But when you go to the room and you realize that you had already taken a shower and you're ready to go to bed, and you realize something was missing, then do you really want to make that call again and get it fixed? So there are different pros and cons on this, but generally also, I'm in favor of, particularly when I'm arriving, that I can I can get to the room and then not going into a long conversation until I'm ready to have that conversation myself.
Yes, that's very much where I'm at as well. That
Okay.
At the end of that long day of travel, I just want to get there and rest. No, not looking for that conversation.
Sure. So I just have two more questions for you before we wrap up, and your tips and tricks and advice has been very helpful. One question that I like to ask all my guests, besides what we have talked about, what other trends do you see happening in hospitality that hoteliers should take note of? Understanding when you travel more on holiday and so on, but just sort of any thoughts that you have on this, what you have observed.
Yeah, I would say one thing I'd like to see more of is the ability for shorter term stays at hotels and locations. And there's certainly some business models where they're trying to say, hey, you don't have to book a whole night or 2 nights. Hey, you fly in, you are at the airport for a while, you just need to freshen up before continuing on, things like that. I was looking for something like that recently on our trip in Rome, and there's just were very few options for kind of a short stay that didn't require, an overnight that wasn't necessary. So I'd love to see more of that. I don't know if that's going to happen or not. I don't know how kind of all the economics of that work. But I'd love to see that. And I would say, the other probably biggest thing that comes to mind for me is, again, how hotels are going to kind of work and integrate with things like ChatGPT and Perplexity, who are becoming the new search engine for stays, and trying to make sure that, hey, if I'm a hotel, I'm a hotel chain, for example, I want to make sure that when someone searches ChatGPT, for example, for my area, that I'm coming up as an option. If you're like, hey, what are the best hotels here? I want to be on that list. Now, how exactly you do that is the $1 million question right now. Yeah. And I can't tell you exactly how you do it because I don't know. But a lot of it, of course, goes down to the same principles as SEO historically, which is making sure you've got great content information online. It's structured in a way that's easy to see and observe. You have, the credibility of people linking to you that shows that you're not just a fly-by-night operation. Having great reviews that you're collecting and displaying so that whoever's looking at you, whether that be the robots or that be real people, can see that you're a great place and you have a great reputation. And focusing on those foundational elements, I would say is really key for being a part of whatever the algorithm is, whether that be SEO historically, whether that be the new AI tools like ChatGPT and so forth.
Yeah. I have quite a few of my viewers are hotel school students, and I was attending just last week event in Croatia, in Zagreb, and it's called Best Stay, which is done. They do it once a year. And at the end of this event, we had some hotel school student that made a 5-minute pitch for some particular topic, and I was kind of thrilled to see a 17-year-old giving an extremely professional pitch about this the topic, whether how to be a great front office manager or how to set up your career and etc. And I was thinking now, since we had this discussion, we have maybe some of the viewers here is going to watch this episode. So they're thinking, well, I want to get into this this part of the business. John, what tips would you give them? How should they get started to get into this advertising agency business, and what are the steps they maybe should take to get started?
That's a great question. I would say we're in such a fast moving industry that getting in and actually doing the work is key. If you try and go to school for digital advertising, a 4-year degree. It's like, well, hey, you get to the end of it and everything is completely different than where it was when you started 4 years ago.
Yeah.
So that doesn't really work. And there's certainly value in courses, but even there, things change so often that I think, courses can be super helpful if they're recent and well done. But at the end of the day, I would encourage just, find an agency, find an advertiser, find someone that you can actually start doing this with. And you're probably not going to make a lot of money initially. Look at it for experience. Are there small businesses that you can say, hey, I have time and I'm going to trade that for you. You don't have time. I'm going to help you and I'm going to figure things out. I'm going to figure out what is it like to post things on a Facebook? What is it like to run a Google ad? Things like that. And just go out and do it. And it won't always work. You will fail, but hey, that's true of everybody in the industry. No matter how expert you go, it's about failing, learning from that, figuring out what worked, what didn't work, iterating upon that, and just getting that real world experience is, I think, the best place that you can go if you want to get into this industry.
Yeah, that was a great tip. Now, people who want to, who are interested to find out more about John Horn or Stub Group, how can they reach you and probably have maybe a hotel student in Zagreb that say, "Oh, I'd like to have a short conversation or a exchange of messages with John Horn." How can they reach you?
Yeah, so a couple places, our website, stubgroup.com, has a lot of information about us and the way people can reach out. You can find me on LinkedIn just by searching my name. And then last thing I would say is our YouTube channel. We put out a lot of content on there about a variety of things, but very much in the digital marketing space, a lot of free content. So search Stub Group on there and subscribe to that, and you'll get lots of free information coming your way.
Well, I'm a subscriber myself, so I'm an avid viewer of your YouTube channel. So great tips. So John, thank you very much for taking the time today and today's episode, and thanks for all your fantastic insight.
Well, thanks so much for having me on. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you for tuning in to The Social Hotelier. If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review, give a thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button to stay updated. And if you're listening to this episode as a podcast, I'd love to see that you give us a review on, let's say, Apple Play, and then that will mean the world to me. All this, what you do, will help me to grow the show, and I will be able to bring more guests to the show. So we have an incredible lineup of guests coming your way, so stay tuned for more thought-provoking conversations. Until next time, take care and keep exploring.